Brace yourself.
Despite how marketable the concept is, a game that truly makes your choices matter is one of the rarest types of experiences in the medium today. It's that holy grail, that goal so many strive for but few have attained. But with that rarity comes immeasurable value. A game that can make your actions bear weight is one of the most powerful statements that the medium can possibly hold. However, recent efforts have had their share of polarity. Dual morality systems like in Infamous became shallow over time, and even Telltale's now classic "insert character here, we'll remember that" formula has worn away its appeal. For a game to tout the weight of its consequences, it needs to do this subtly. And Pyre is one of the biggest successes that this phenomenon could have ever achieved. In a daring direction, Pyre uses its gameplay to make this happen. It acts with risk and weight, and it does this not through its dialogue, story, or even by its presentation in general, but through its design. On a fundamental level, Pyre is built to make your every action count. Supergiant Games have already proven themselves as mighty forces in the indie sphere. Bastion was a fresh take on action role-playing games, and Transistor was stylish but packed with depth. With Pyre, Supergiant pushed themselves even further. Its mixture of team sports, role-playing games, and visual novel elements is unusual to say the least, but it's not a hollow experience. On the contrary, in the heat of a match with your opponents rapidly tossing the orb and sliding past your attacks, it's easy to forget the stakes of your challenge, and those stakes are what drive Pyre's most interesting directions. Going forward, I will be discussing material of Pyre that isn't revealed until later in the game. I do recommend playing Pyre, and I understand that revealing this key information will damage some viewers' experience with the game. So I'm prefacing the remainder of the video with a spoiler warning. If you haven't played Pyre yet, I recommend doing so and returning to this analysis video later. The goal in Pyre is to get your team of banished outcasts back into their kingdom known as the Commonwealth. To earn liberation, you must defeat other groups of exiles in special rituals known as the Rites, which resemble team-based sports like basketball or soccer. Besting your opponent lets your characters grow in experience and strength, all while leading up to the special Liberation Rite, the event that can lead to freedom back in the Commonwealth. Your team members' livelihoods are always on the line, and there's no guarantee that your battle will end in victory. However, the greatest tool toward their liberation from the treacherous downside region is your own ability to command them as the reader, the coach of their techniques. A careful hand and sharp reflexes can lead your team to victory and the salvation they strive to attain. But as expected, nothing is ever that easy. There's always a catch. Your own actions, whether positive or negative, have consequences, and Pyre's ultimate challenge comes from how well you can cope with your hardships, endurances, and weaknesses. It's a test of holding true to your own responsibility. Each character has its own strengths and values in the heat of a rite, but you quickly learn that the path to liberation is a narrow one. Only one exiled can depart from the downside per liberation rite, and ultimately there are fewer liberation rites than members in your team. Each liberation rite is a choice of who you believe should leave the downside, and once you nominate them and win the rite, they are out of your team permanently. To make things even more tense, your nomination during the Liberation Rites can only be selected from your most experienced members. You must choose from the 3 members with the highest enlightenment statistic in your party, and since you gain enlightenment from participating in rites, the game requires you to part with someone that you've spent a lot of time with. In this regard, the motives of your characters directly conflict with their utility for the player. Your best techniques cultivate your strongest players, but the endgame has you separating from them. This is a heavy burden for a player to bear, and on the part of Supergiant, it's actually incredibly cunning. You're put in a position to part with someone that's repeatedly led you to victory, all for the sake of their own freedom. You want to help them achieve liberation, but you have to pay the cost of losing a very powerful component to your gameplay strategy, one that could weaken your team considerably. But you're the player, you're ultimately in control of what happens, regardless of what your characters want. If they desire another outcome, you have no obligation to take it, as long as the game's programming serves your desired outcome. It's something that can be worked around if you simply assert that control and move on without them. But there was a moment in my playthrough of Pyre that changed this. One that totally tested my responsibility as a player and role as the reader. One singular moment where Pyre's potential was not just achieved, but surpassed. I was to perform the rite against the Highwing Remnants, led by the harp Tamitha. Of my team members, I selected Hedwyn to be liberated, with Pamitha, Tamitha's sister whom she has a vendetta against, as one of the two supporters. As the match met a fever pitch, Pamitha spoke up with dialogue, saying that she desires for her sister to be victorious, and for our team to fail. Of course, I fought against this, still struggling to earn Hedwyn's freedom, but in the end, I couldn't defeat Tamitha's team, and she was liberated. It was a bizarre moment. I had failed a liberation rite, the only one that I lost in my entire playthrough, yet Pamitha's goal was served. The result dug up a conflict between my desires as a player and as a participant in the story. While I still retained control and agency, I realized that my failure ultimately had a purpose: to flesh out the relationship between Pamitha and her vengeful sister. Very few games I've played have turned what is essentially a fail state into something constructive to the story, all without robbing me of my agency and without refusing to give me a chance to combat that result. The game kept going. I didn't get a second chance to battle the Highwing Remnants. Tamitha was liberated and my team's journey continued. It was a result whose permanence only made the moment resonate more. The story was served, yet my own goal was not, and I had to simply roll with it. I think this moment truly demonstrates how well Pyre approaches player responsibility. It wants you to feel the consequences of your actions, whether they serve your motives or not. It wants you to cope with the heavy cost of losing a longtime supporter or giving an opponent a reward you feel you deserve. But it does this deviously. Even in the heat of rites, your moves hold weight not just in skill and technique, but in motive. This is all without taxation on the player's role. Any force placed against you is set as a test of your responsibility, whether you can bear the results of your actions and endure the hardships that they bring. Pyre's stakes are high. It's a heavy burden of choice that the player must undergo. The weight of decision, sacrifice, and enduring hardship all combine into something brooding. As free-flowing and energetic as the Rite's core gameplay is, it's framed by a setup that tests the player's will. Can you overcome a character's desire to fulfill your own goal? Can you continue on even after a defeat? Can you abandon your most powerful team members so they can achieve freedom? These are questions that weld and synergize into Pyre's most interesting aspects, ones that are easy to overlook in favor of its enjoyable gameplay during the rites. I love that facade. I love how Pyre is able to deepen itself beyond the rites, rewarding players who dig into its narrative to see what kind of game it actually is. It's heavy and dark, one that subtly tests player responsibility and their will to bear it. It's dramatic and artistic in one of the best possible ways, to serve the player's goals, but to challenge the player's ability to stick with those goals. Consequences need to sting a little to show their importance. Success should feel liberating, but failure should feel painful. Pyre uses its structure and framing to make both success and failure memorable. It gave me a reason to care about my actions beyond the wins and losses. There wasn't a single instance where I didn't feel wholly responsible for my actions while playing Pyre. It healed, it hurt, and I won't forget a moment of it.